How good would you be if you could see the screen at recognizing famous people? We've had to adapt this first bit. Is my PowerPoint up, Anastasia? Thank you. Now, those of you on the live stream are going to do a visual "Can you guess the celebrity" quiz, whilst those of us in the room are going to do and if you can go back and watch this on the link afterwards and see if you can guess the celebrities. At the moment, all you can see is his or her ears. But we're going to do, in the room, we are going to do a "Who is this?" I'm going to give you up to 7 clues, and you have to guess this Bible character. But I will give the people watching on the live stream a nose as well as some ears. So, in the room, I am an Old Testament character. Narrows it down slightly, but we now give a bit of a hairline as well. I was a very determined person. Let's give some eyes. I became part of a family from the city of David. And if you're watching it on your phone on the live stream simultaneously, feel free to shout out if you can guess the celebrity. I will give. So that's kind of almost a giveaway. Number 4 in the room. I worked very hard to get food. Very good, Ruth. So that was the first one. I'll just confirm the answer, although some of you may not even get the answer when I show the full face. Let's go on to our second celebrity, for those of you watching on the live stream. And our second biblical character. I am a New Testament character. Has anyone got the picture from their phone? No. Okay. I'll carry on going. Feel free to comment on the chat, those of you that are watching. There are 9 of you on there. Second picture, a bit of hair as well. My mother was Jewish. My father was Greek. Very good. Got it in 2. Timothy. I can guarantee that you probably won't be as successful with the pictures. Third one. I am a New Testament character. I was present when the daughter of Jairus was brought back to life. I was one who saw that the Samaritan people did not recognize Jesus. Zebedee was my father. You can only have one. You've got to be certain which one you're going to go for, or do you want to wait? I was with Jesus at his transfiguration. John. Very good. Well done. And for those of you that are watching, very good. James Rycroft has got the second picture via WhatsApp. So very good. So James has got the second one, although I expect even if I was to show the whole picture, some of you wouldn't have a clue what Ariana Grande looked like. And the first one, for those of you who are watching on street, was David Beckham. So earlier on, we read Matthew's account of the first Palm Sunday. Jesus and his disciples, they approach Jerusalem. Jesus sends a couple of his disciples off to go and get a donkey so that he can ride this donkey into the city. And as they approach the city, the crowds kind of pick up on what is going on. They pick up on the symbolic significance of what Jesus is doing. Many of them will have heard the stories. They would have maybe seen and witnessed miracles for themselves. And there were all sorts of rumors that were swirling around as to whether or not Jesus could be the long-awaited for Messiah, the one who had been sent by God to save his people. And they start laying their coats on the floor. They start cutting down palm branches and putting those on the road. And they start shouting out lines from their scriptures, what we call the Old Testament. And so there is a lot of noise. There is a lot of commotion. And as they progress towards the city of Jerusalem, the city is stirred and people are asking, who is this? And this is one of the most important questions that we can ask as we encounter Jesus over the course of this next week. As the story goes from Palm Sunday, it goes to Maundy Thursday, to Good Friday, and to Easter Sunday, there are a whole range of answers to this question, who is this? And so, as the story unfolds, we need to be asking, who is this? And it's not just enough to ask the question. This is a question that demands an answer from all of us. And in terms of all of the questions that we will answer in our lives, this question, who is this, is one of the most important. So what about Matthew? What is Matthew's answer to this question? Well, Matthew was one of Jesus' disciples, and he wrote Matthew's gospel. He wrote the story that we read earlier on, and as the author of the story, he has the value or the advantage of hindsight, because apart from Jesus, Matthew, the author, is the only person who knows what is about to happen, because Matthew is writing not just from days down the road, but Matthew is writing from years down the road. And so Matthew knows the answer to this question, who is this? And for Matthew, Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus is the Son of God. He's the one who the whole of the Old Testament story was pointing towards. He's the one who's come to save not just Israel, but to save the whole of the world, to put right what went wrong in the Garden of Eden, to restore that perfect relationship between God and humanity. He is the one who Zechariah was writing about 500 years before, and we read that at the beginning of our service. He was also the one that David wrote about, and a couple of quotes from the Psalms. If you look in the footnotes, you will see that some of the things that they were saying were from things that David had written. And by including Jesus' reference or Jesus' quote from Psalm 8, Matthew is highlighting Jesus' claim to be God. You know, the verses from Psalm 8, when they're looked at in context, they are speaking about God. God, the Creator. And so for Matthew, Jesus goes back further than Zechariah. He goes back further than David. He's not just the Messiah. It turns out that the Messiah is actually God himself. He goes right back, or Matthew wants us to go right back to the very first page of the Bible, where we encounter God creating the heavens and the earth. Jesus was there. And for Matthew, the Easter story isn't just a series of random events, things that happen that take Jesus by surprise. Jesus is totally overtaken by events. No, Matthew wants us to know that none of this is a surprise. These were things that were anticipated hundreds of years before. This is all a part of God's plan. And Matthew wants us to know this with confidence as we head towards Maundy Thursday, as we head to Good Friday. These things are all a part of God's plan. The whole of history has been moving towards the cross. Now, no one in the crowd, no one in Jerusalem, none of the disciples anticipated what was about to happen to Jesus. And when it did happen, none of them recognized it as a part of God's plan and the fulfillment of Scripture. But Matthew knows from his vantage point in history that this is all a part of God's plan. And we've been moving towards the cross ever since Genesis chapter 3. So, what about the crowds? What was their answer to this question? Well, it would seem initially as though the crowds agreed with Matthew. Here they are welcoming Jesus into Jerusalem. They are acknowledging him as king, as the long-awaited Messiah. They're putting their cloaks on the road. They were shouting verses from the Old Testament. And their answer to this question is, well, this is Jesus the prophet from Nazareth. And yet, whatever they thought about Jesus on Palm Sunday, they had totally changed their tune by Good Friday, by which point the crowd are shouting, "Crucify him." You know, they had an idea in their heads as to the sort of king they wanted, and Jesus didn't fit the bill. They knew what they wanted their king to do for them, but it turned out that God's plans were very different to theirs. Now, we've recently finished our series on the Sermon on the Mount, and clearly the crowds who were there hadn't been listening properly to Jesus, because they wanted a king, but they didn't want a king who told them to love their enemies. They wanted the Romans gone. They didn't want a king who said that if a Roman soldier tells you to carry his bag 1 mile, I want you to carry it too. Jesus didn't fit their agenda. He wasn't convenient. He wasn't comfortable. And given the choice of take it or leave it, most of the crowd chose leave it. So what about the religious leaders? Well, Jesus may not have been what the crowds were looking for, but the religious leaders saw Jesus as a threat and as a challenge. Whilst the crowds would have been prepared to just leave it, the religious leaders couldn't afford to do that. Because although Jesus wasn't what they were expecting, he challenged everything they believed. He challenged what they thought they knew about God, what they thought they knew about the Scriptures, what they thought they knew about themselves, what they thought they knew about others, about Israel, about their religion, and about the temple. And Jesus challenged their reputation, he challenged their standing in society, and he challenged their power. They had too much to lose, and therefore Jesus had to go. But what about the disciples? Who do they think Jesus is? Now, if at this point in the story you'd asked the disciples who they thought Jesus was, they would have probably agreed with Matthew and with the crowds. And they'd have come up with all of the right names. It's just that they might not have understood those in exactly the same way that Jesus did. They saw him as the Messiah. They saw him as the coming king. But they had more invested than the crowds, because they'd already declared Jesus is Lord. They'd given up everything to follow Jesus. And as they approached Jerusalem, they were probably anticipating some kind of showdown with the Romans and with the religious leaders. They certainly didn't expect Gethsemane and then the cross. They weren't expecting Jesus to be arrested and to be dead within 5 days. And as the events of this week unfold, they certainly thought that something catastrophic must have gone wrong with Jesus' plan. Their hopes were dashed and the bottom fell out of their world. And whilst there was still a lot that they didn't understand, they certainly saw Jesus as their Lord. They left everything to follow him. And when he asked them to go into a village and help themselves to a donkey and bring it to him, they did what he said. This is my favourite slide of all the slides from today. It's a bit of a raised eyebrow slide. We don't have any record of how this conversation between Jesus and the disciples went. We don't know how many eyebrows were raised by the disciples as Jesus reassured them that the line, "The Lord needs them," would be enough to pacify the owner of the donkey, that these two random strangers who have just rocked up and started untying the animals, just tell them the Lord needs them and everything will be fine. Who uses rock, paper, scissors ever to make a decision? Anyone? There's a few hands going up. And you can imagine the conversation as the disciples approach the donkey. That must be the one Jesus is talking about. Go and untie it. I'll stand here and keep guard. Me? Why have I got to do it? Why don't you go and do it? You go and untie it, and I'll stay here at a safe distance, and I will keep watch. And maybe they did rock, paper, scissors, best of 5 to see which of them it was that had to go and untie the donkey. But whatever they thought about what Jesus asked them to do, the important thing is that they did it. They were obedient to what Jesus had asked of them. So what about us? What about you? What is our answer to this question? Who is Jesus? I wonder, are we like the crowd? We've encountered Jesus, we've heard things about him, but he doesn't really seem to fit what we're looking for. He's not going to be able to give us what we want. You like most of what you see, you like most of what you hear, but every now and again, he just seems to push things a little bit too far. He seems to be asking just a little bit too much. Or are we more like the religious leaders? We've encountered Jesus and he challenges absolutely everything that we thought we knew. He challenges our beliefs. He challenges what we think we know about ourselves. And we've just got too much to lose. If we're going to follow Jesus, there is just too much to give up. The cost is too high. Or are we like the disciples? We've not got it all sorted out yet. We're working it out as we go along. We understand a little bit more about who Jesus is as we're on this journey. But we've chosen to follow him. We've chosen to obey him. And although things aren't always comfortable, although sometimes he asks us things that don't really seem to make sense, we obey, even though it doesn't always fit together. And we're discovering more of who Jesus is as we're on this journey. You know, Matthew recognizes that the whole of the Old Testament was pointing to Jesus. It was pointing towards the cross. It was pointing towards the resurrection. The events of that first Easter week changed everything. Through the Easter story, because of Jesus' death and resurrection, we have an offer of new life. God offers us forgiveness. He offers us forgiveness for the past. He offers us hope for the future. And he offers us life and purpose in the present. And whether life feels like Palm Sunday with all its excitement and celebration, or whether life feels like Maundy Thursday with its subdued questions and confusion, or whether life feels like Good Friday with its darkness and despair, the truth remains that Sunday is coming. So don't miss out on what Jesus has to offer us this Easter. Let's pray.